When that funky tune gets played on the internet, you know it's time for the Altar Live show. Welcome in, Altar Live fam. It is so good to have you here. Wherever you are watching us, either on Facebook, on YouTube, if you're watching us in one of our emails on demand, thanks for being a part of the family. Thanks for joining in. We obviously are missing one key member of the Altar Live show today, just like last week. And Molly and I kind of held up the fort a little bit. Molly, if you're watching, thanks so much for joining the program last week. We love what you guys are doing at the Table UMC. But Maeve actually is across the pond, as we talked about. She is in jolly old England. And actually, the guest we'll talk about what we were just talking about off air when we get to that. I just saw him stretching and dancing in the green room, so it's perfectly fine. Maeve actually sent me a little video this morning and wanted me to play it for the entire Altar Live fam. So if you will give me just a little bit of your time, here's Maeve Brooks from jolly old England. Here we go.
Hi Andy, we're about to see Much Ado About Nothing at the Globe, at Shakespeare's Globe. And while there's much ado about Altar Live, it's definitely not about nothing. It's about face-to-face interaction. It's about building community and so much more. Miss you guys. Bye.
So Maeve, we love her. That is about the cheesiest video that she could have sent, because she went all college girl, first job out of college like she is, tied it into Altar Live, tied it into everything else that's happening on around the world. Maeve, go enjoy your vacation. Send me videos, because I like seeing the Globe Theater. I love seeing, Much Ado About Nothing sounds awesome. But go have fun. Stop thinking about Altar Live. You're on vacation, dude. Get out of here. Hey, speaking of England, speaking of everything that's going on, we actually have a very interesting conversation to bring you today from my good buddy, Jon Pyle. And Jon, we're going to discuss a little bit, not so much about Altar Live, more about digital church, things going on in the digital realm. Jon himself I met him a couple of months back, actually about 6 months ago now. This dude blew my mind with some of the things he was talking about, some of the kind of the spin he was putting on the church world. He was detailing things about working in a church and not being burnt out, and he was speaking directly to my heart. And then he started bringing more podcasting into the world, but on top of that, he started writing blogs. And I remember in one of our Slack channels, Jon said, I'm not really a writer, but here we go, here's the first thing. And it was like this mind-blowing thing of, why have you not been doing this for longer, my friend? And so I wanted to have him on the program today, A, because Maeve isn't here, but B, he has an awesome perspective on mental health, on things that are happening in the world around us. And, without further ado, Mr. Jon Pyle, welcome to the program, my friend, all the way from San Antonio, Texas. How is Thursday treating you so far?
Thursday is great, Governor. Feeling good. Bringing that English vibe. And I don't know Maeve, so I'm sorry, Maeve. But Andy, that was very much like, hi, I'm on staff at Campus Crusade, and we've begun to reach the English college students. Like, it's like the missionary support video.
Maeve, I know Maeve's going to watch this, so it's 8:30, almost 9 o'clock at night where she is over in London. She's probably in the Globe Theater still watching Much Ado About Nothing. She'll watch this tomorrow. Maeve, number one, we love you. Come back safe. Number two, my goodness, go enjoy your vacation. Go enjoy your time. we're gonna stop making fun of you because it's
Yes.
not in any harm. Jon, welcome. And before we get going, I'd love for you to talk to the fam just about your origin story, where you came from, how you got into ministry, how you got into doing what you're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on, Andy. I appreciate it. So, my origin story, I didn't grow up in the church. I wasn't a church kid, and I got saved in the great, like, mid to late 90s youth group revival of, I think, the first time I actually said I believed in Jesus was actually my grandmother's funeral.
Oh,
Because yeah, okay. She was from a small town, Doherty, Oklahoma, and she had a hellfire and brimstone preacher, and we all came for her. I laugh now. I was terrified as like a 10-year-old. Uh, we all came to her funeral, and he was like, the one thing that she would want is not to have her grandchildren burn in hell. And we were all like, okay, grandma, I believe in Jesus. Like, I don't know what Jesus did. I don't know what the cross is for. I don't know anything. It's just going, I love you, grandma. I don't want to die and burn in hell. That was my first salvation experience. But in high school, I started going to youth group for all the wrong reasons. Meet girls from other high schools, eat pizza. My parents would let me stay out.
Yep.
It was awesome. And then like this Jesus guy really just got a hold of me. And so my story has been one of God redeeming my bad motives, whatever they might be. And in this case, I found Jesus. And so coming back to England, okay, Maeve, while I'm in this period of time, I come to my senior year of high school and they're like, hey, we're going to take a mission trip to visit our sister church in England.
Oh, let's go.
And I was like, well, I want to go to England. And I was still kind of on this Jesus guy. But I'm like, I want to go to England. And all the church people were like, okay, but you got to raise the money and you got to participate in this fundraiser and you got to go to Wednesday night blast and Sunday night, I forget the name of it. And Wednesday night blast wasn't the thing, but you have to do this. And there's a mission trip to Mexico and there's this. And I'm like, if I get to go to England, I'm all in.
Let's go.
Like, yeah, whatever. I just got to show up and do this stuff. Yes, absolutely. So we ended up going to England, and that was an amazing experience of somebody who had never been out. I went to Mexico, but when you grow up in California and Texas, going to Mexico doesn't feel like you're going out of country. It feels like you're going to the old country. Like, because where you grew up used to be Mexico.
Totally.
So going over there was a transformative experience for my faith and everything else, and learning about what this Jesus guy was about. The short version of my professional story, never thought about working in ministry, but was still going to church, doing that thing. And I was working and I thought, man, this career is going to be my thing. And I was going to be an achiever and be a CEO. And then at some point we moved to San Antonio. I had a long period of unemployment. I think it was probably 6 to 8 months, but I think when I tell the story, I exaggerate. 12 to 18 months, as my wife.
6 years.
Yeah, it was a 40-year desert. Jon, you're not even 40.
It was a burning bush,
year,
and
baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was crazy. It's Moses' story. Although I might look more like Pharaoh. But this period of time really bring me Moses.
There we go.
Yeah. The period of time, God just had to draw a bunch of stuff out of me. And again, my motive was to get a job and do all this stuff. And his was to make me a better person and to deal with some of the junk that I had inside. And so I ended up getting hired at a church as the creative pastor's assistant. And then as the producer, 2 part-time roles, right? And the producer of our less aggressive 848 service.
Okay.
You would probably call it traditional in your church.
Okay. That is such a church thing, by the way. We're not going to hire you for 1 full-time job. We've got 2 part-time jobs, so we're going to give that. But there's no such thing as a part-time job in church. So really, we're hiring you for like 2, 3/4, maybe 2 full-time jobs. Have fun.
Absolutely. And I've told you this before, but I got fired from my assistant job within a week of like, I'm not detail oriented or organized. And the guy that I was working for was more detail oriented and organized. And he's like, you know what? We're going to find something else for you to do. You stay away from base camp. You stay away from emails and all.
Don't touch Asana.
Things.
We don't need you in there.
We don't need you managing our tasks or our projects. Yep. What I need you to do is something that fits your personality. And that kind of started my way into ministry. And it was video. I was helping manage our video production house. and then eventually like getting into digital stuff down the line because it was something that I was fired up about.
So what is your current position right now?
Ooh, I am an associate pastor, which
Okay.
doesn't tell you anything, but I am responsible for pastoral care. I do marriage, prayer, and then I'm the digital pastor as well.
There we go. So, and that's what kind of where we want to hit. So you're at City Church in San Antonio.
That's right.
Is it technically San Antonio or is it a different city?
It is absolutely San Antonio.
Okay, cool.
It is 100% within city limits.
Okay, sweet. So digital is kind of where we want to camp. Ultra Live, obviously being a digital church platform that is all about community engagement, that's all about reaching into the community. It was a platform that was born from the pandemic. And that's when, it's been a startup since really for the last just over a year. And what we have found is that there is a lot of pushback to digital ministry. There's a lot of in-person advocates that will say you can never do community online, yada, yada, yada. Now, one thing, and this is for the Ultra Life fam, Jon actually, and I don't know if this is conscious or if this is just where God has put his heart, but he has a real gift for speaking into mental health. And so I want to camp out there for just a second. When you, Jon, look at the intersection of digital church and mental health, what have you been seeing, especially over the last 2 years, but ostensibly for the last 6 months or so?
Yeah. Well, one, there is a mental health crisis. It's not just the youth and the teens, it is everybody. And Pastor Rick Warren, who's awesome, coined the phrase a tsunami of grief that would land on us as we start to move out of COVID, right? We're living with a pandemic. We're just like, we're not going to eradicate it. We'll just deal with it as it pops up every now and then, right? And like, that's just how we're going to live. And so there's this tsunami of grief of the people we've lost, which is well over 1 million at this point, and in the United States. And it's an incalculable loss. And then you go into, okay, that's the actual funerals and all that stuff. Then there's, what else have we lost in this period? People have lost jobs. People have lost connection with family members. They've lost vital institutions in their community. Food banks are doubling how many people they serve with food. We've lost so much, and grief is how we process loss. And we're in a mental health crisis that's coming after a physical health crisis. Or that's within it, that's kind of riding the wave of it. And that is so significant. And I don't think people have just come to terms with that. And so that's one thing when it relates to digital, is just going, I get that you might not think this is a great tool, but we're not in a place where we argue about tools. We're on the battlefield and we got to get it done. This is triage. This isn't, well, I can operate when we have a hospital. It's like, I got a whiskey and a hacksaw, buddy. So bite on this, drink this. Here's one for your wound, one for you. And we're going, because this is a crisis. And I just want to make sure that I'm pressing the emergency button to make sure that people know that digital tools in a crisis like this are invaluable. Invaluable. Because the thing that I've seen so often, Andy, and I think one of the things that Alter is working on and working to eliminate, is the idea that digital is streaming your service. And when people it's almost apples and oranges, because when you try to bring up a digital conversation, the in-person people are like, well, somebody's got to come in person to church. And it's like, yeah, I would 100% agree that experiencing a church service online and experiencing it in person, two completely different things, and in person is a better experience. But when I'm talking about digital church, there's 167 other hours in the week. 166 if you go to a church where the preacher goes too long. But there's 167 hours in the week where people need us. And where that connects to mental health is, you don't wait to have a panic attack on Sunday at 11. You don't wait to go through a crisis on Sunday at 11. It happens Tuesday at 2 a.m. And the crisis happens Saturday at 4 p.m. And it happens all throughout the week, and it builds. And so people need places to go for the other 167 hours. And digital is an invaluable tool for that, because if you're in a community that's bigger than 10 to 20 people, and especially during the pandemic, Andy, especially this is what we showed, when we all bubbled, we couldn't go to people's houses. We couldn't go to the hospital. We couldn't hold the funeral. We couldn't have the wedding. We couldn't do all the in-person things that we were used to. We only had digital. And a lot of people are not coming back from that. A
Yeah.
lot of people aren't rushing out to go in person. And so digital is an invaluable tool to help people with the other 167 hours. And I think that's part of why Alter the need for Alter arose and has been something that drives it, is just this idea that digital is more than service. We're in a mental health crisis. Digital tools are going to help. So I'm at a point where I'm just like, I'm not going to argue with you about whether this is valid or not. I have a hacksaw and whiskey. Like I'm going out there and I'm helping the people that have the mental health equivalent of lost limbs during this time, and they need someone to help.
So let's say you have someone pop into, they want to FaceTime with you and they say, hey, I've got this issue going on, and it's a digital pastor from wherever, and you sit down and you say, okay, the digital pastor looks at you and says, hey, I'm missing the connection here. I called this episode that we're doing right now, Is Digital Good? And I put in the description, is it healthy? Is it all these things? If you were to counsel that digital pastor and he asked you that question, is this good? I'm failing to see the connection. What would you tell him?
I mean, my first thing was say, yeah, this is good. And it's good because God uses it. It's not good because it's inherently good. It's good because God uses it. Yeah. And just like anything else, were the Roman roads good? I don't know, but God used them, right? They transported Roman soldiers that probably they transported the Roman soldiers that sacked Jerusalem and tore the temple down. But they also carried Paul and Timothy and Silas and Barnabas and all these things. And that's so good. If the culture is using something, and I just want to tell you, Pastor, what's not good? QAnon. And your people are getting 24/7 QAnon on their online and digital spaces, and they're believing bonkers conspiracy theories because we won't get into the arena. Like they're being discipled. And if you want to disciple them, you either get on the road or get off, because I don't have time to convince people anymore. And so I think it would be to the digital pastor. I'd probably try to use kinder language, Andy.
Yeah.
But
maybe
I think
sometimes you need to smack with the stick.
Yeah. And I would exhort this person, right? This is good because God uses it. And I would use stories of, there are people that I just talked to a woman this weekend. It was her first time back at church since COVID. And she's been staying away. And what she said was, I've been so afraid. And at some point I realized it wasn't the COVID, it was the fear.
Yeah.
But I was watching you guys online. I was texting with people. I was staying connected in any way that I could. And because of that, I knew I could come back. And you guys wouldn't be like, where were you? Right? It's like, okay, she had to fight that fear. She had to deal with it. And she dealt with a really hard time. And so you have people out there that are suffering. And in this case, she was suffering from her own fear. And so digital pastor, this is an opportunity to pastor people in a direct way, in a way that you might not be able to do it. And I'll also say it's a great way to pastor younger people.
Yeah.
And again, digital methods that people discount as digital are text messages. And our buddy Tom Pounder is great at doing text message stuff. Yep. But it's like, if you're in your 20s, a lot of times people are more likely to text me their big issues than to talk to me about their big issues. Because it's just the familiarity of being like, I feel like my life is falling apart. And then if you talk to them in person, it's like, okay.
Yeah, everything's good.
Everything's okay. Yep. But behind the wall of text, it's like, this is what's going on with my mom, and this is what's going on with my girlfriend, and blah, 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 blah. And so texting is a digital tool. And just like the phone is a digital tool. Like, I'm sure if there was a podcast back in 1920 something, when phones got more common in houses, there'd be pastors that are like, phone ministry isn't real ministry.
Oh, gosh.
Right? It's the devil's tool, the phone. It's the telegraph for me. I don't know what people were saying, but technological advancements are going to happen. And so we pastor anywhere, right? I would become all things to all men so that some would be saved. I think that's paraphrasing
It's
the
close.
Paul
Yeah.
teaching. Yeah. And it's like, dude, let's use the technology that's there, because the bad guys, and I don't really mean bad guys, but maybe
If the shoe fits.
People that are leading people in a bad direction for their own benefit are using these tools effectively.
Amen.
And we are behind. But we have good news, and we have truth, and we have spiritual change and awakening, and a Jesus who continues to work in people. And so, man, the digital is absolutely good and can unlock so many things that you might not have thought about.
So, big question. What is the future? Look 3 to 5 years down the road into digital ministry. What's the future?
I think churches are people are doing this. Whether churches catch on or not is going to depend on whether they're here in 3 to 5 years. Is people are no longer defining their church by where they get their content, where they get their care.
Yep.
And so if you're going to define my church is where you get your content and that's all that it is, I think you're going to be behind in 3 to 5 years, because your content probably isn't as good as Andy Stanley. You're probably not as good as Stephen Furtick. You're not as good at some of these propaganda machines for any political affiliation that's cranking out all this amazing stuff. And that's part of the competition. It's not just other churches. And so when you recognize that care is going to be how people define their church home and their community, 3 to 5 years, I hope that we're going to have thriving digital communities connected to thriving physical communities that are thriving those other 167 hours.
Yeah.
And I think the next 3 to 5 years is going to be about winning the 167 hours that aren't Sunday at 11. And I think the churches that do that the best, and there are some churches that are amazing at it. And I do mean small groups, right? Small groups are like proactive pastoral care, which is cool because it's not all on the pastor to do this. 90% of the pastoral care things that I take care of could have been taken care of by a good friend. Could have been taken care of by somebody who reads the Bible regularly and is a mature Christian. Because they don't need to know eschatology. Like they're not asking about premillennial, postmillennial, superlapsarianism. Like that's not the thing. They're going, how do I get my wife to come home? How do I get my kids to stop hurting himself?
Yeah. How
do I move on from this depression that I can't shake?
Yeah.
Those aren't questions that you need a theologian. Those are questions that you need a friend. And so I think if we can expand care to not just be pastor centered, so I won't say deplatforming, but deconstructing some of the platforms that we've built of high person says thing everybody follows and consumption, moving from consumption to catalysts and moving from content to care. That I think that's the future of the next 3 to 5 years, or at least let me say this. It's where I'm betting, because that's where I'm going. And so if I'm wrong, it's going to be me going, sorry, guys. I went this way and it didn't work.
No, I look at platforms like what we're doing with Altar Live, like, what ostensibly Web 3.0 is based on as well. And it's this idea of not necessarily deplatform and not anything like that, but it's almost decentralization of where your content's coming from. And, our job then is to use tools like we have in groups and use meetings that we have and, use these 1-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1 platform type connections that you can do in the Altar Live, or you can do through text messaging, or you could do through FaceTime that will, it's turn into the make one be one thing that Christianity has been based on for 2,000 years now. Be a disciple, go be, and you be one, and then you go make one. And it's the quickest way to multiply anything. You look at churches that are happening in Africa and Asia in particular, and outside of a couple of small instances, most of their churches aren't these big, huge mega churches. There's, Joseph Kwan or whatever that guy's name is in South Korea with a church of 100,000. Like, okay, that's a city. But outside of that, it's oppressed house churches meeting in basements and meeting in schools and warehouses that are one pastor to 12 families. And that pastor is risking his life, and yet that church is growing. And you look at the things that we're doing here, and we can barely wake up 2 Sundays out of the month to even log on. And that's not an indictment, but it's just a sign of the times. And so we have these digital tools that we're presenting to people going, just use them. Just use them. Yeah. It's easy. Yeah. Look how easy this is. And guys like you and I will sit there and like, man, I don't know what else I can do. God has given me purview over this flock, and he's given you purview over this flock, and you do the best you can. And then when you come face to face with Jesus, you hope that everything is working out for his good. That was a long rant and basically went nowhere. Sorry about that.
Heck no, dude, you went everywhere. You went to great pieces, because at the end of the day, Jesus isn't going to, when you get there, he's not going to ask you how many followers you had on Twitter.
Totally.
He's going to ask you about the people as a pastor. I'm speaking to the pastors. He's going to ask you about the people that were right in front of you.
Totally.
How did you take care of the people in your family? How did you take care of the people in your church, your staff, your volunteers? That's what he's going to ask you about. And digital means are a way to stay connected to those people. Like when I can't hang out with my wife, I text her.
Totally.
Right? Hey, how's work going? Right? Like that's not a weird thing for somebody you have a relationship with. And so I'm 100% with you, because I know that I've been guilty of this. Speaking of God redeeming motives, right? Like I think part of the reason to get involved in digital is because it can be bigger and it can be bigger reach, and I can speak to more people and I can gain a bigger following, and that's cool. But man, I'm not called to pastor everybody. Like I'm not called, just like I'm called to be married to my wife and be a husband to my wife and be a father to my kids. I am not called to pastor everybody.
Yep.
And do I help other people's kids at the park? Absolutely. I'm not going to be like, oh, sorry, your kid got hurt. Like, hey, if your kid is stuck between the bars, I'm going to help him get his hand out. Right. But my calling isn't to pastor every single person who hears my voice. And there's also contextualized things in there. Like when you have a relationship with someone, you can speak to them totally differently than when there's someone off the street.
Amen.
And shout out, if you're out there and you're an amazing communicator, build a church of 150,000 like the guy in South Korea. Like do that. I don't think Jesus is against that. I don't think this is burn the mega churches, right? Like, because that's bad. Right. That's dumb. Right. But at the same time, Andy, let me just keep it real with you. I'm 39 years old. If I was the next Stephen Furtick, I would have taken by now. Like it would have happened.
Probably, yeah.
It's almost like, well, I'm going to play in the NBA. Like, no, if I was going to play in the NBA when I was 18 and in amazing shape and could dunk a basketball, that would have been the time. And so I'm like, and some of this is just limitations of like, God can do anything. So God could absolutely be like, here's Jon's platform of 100,000 people. I don't know that he should trust me with that, so I wouldn't even ask for it. But it's like, what can I do though? What has he wired me to do that I can do? And so that's my rambling answer to your rambling answer of like, you're only called to pastor these people, and it doesn't mean you have to go bigger. And I think as some of our elders and folks who don't use social media as much, or who don't use digital tools in the same way that we do, I think a lot of them are true saints, like true church saints that have paid the price, that have done the prayers, that have cooked the pot roasts, that have gone to people's house, that they've done the work of church. And so these aren't people who are jerks. But I think they associate digital with like Facebook and growth and things that maybe aren't as seemingly holy,
influencers and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And they're thinking, oh, are we going to get into that?
Yep.
And so I think these elder saints, like, I think part of it is just sharing the heart of like, this is how we want to care for people and pastor people. And I don't need I don't need you to do it, but I would love to have you if you wanted to. And you know what's so funny about that, Andy? We have our Young at Heart group, which is all of our like 60 plus people. They're called Young at Heart. They picked the name too. It kind of sounds condescending if you name it that way, but they picked it. But during the pandemic, they usually meet in person, and they like that was really hard for them not to.
Yep.
But they didn't create a Facebook group.
Yep.
They didn't really get on Zoom, but they kind of did a phone tree where they would just call and check on each other, which is old school church. I mean, that's old school church stuff. But when it was all taken away and meeting wasn't an option, they were able to utilize that. And I think in that, a lot of their perspectives on digital grew. Because now they're like, wait, we even started texting each other, right? Like I text my grandkids so I can text, you know, my friend. And it was cool to see that happen.
That's interesting. Man, I don't have anywhere else to go with you because I feel like we've just gone 5 miles here. Anything else looking forward into the future that you would want to offer to the Altar Live fam in terms of digital connection, digital guidance, digital leadership, digital gathering, anything along those lines?
Yeah, I think and we had talked about this a little bit. I think the temptation with digital is that it's 24/7.
Yeah.
You can be plugged in all the time. And so I just want to say to you, digital pastor, person who's trying to carry the digital mantle, if you are used up and your relationship with Jesus sucks, you will be of no help to anybody. That is so good. You will be of no help to anybody. So please take care of yourself. Create the good digital habits. Turn off, disconnect if it's good for you. Okay, let me say it is good for you. So like, turn off, just figure out when.
Right.
I don't know when it works. Like I answer text messages later than I answer phone calls. Like the text doesn't bring that much out of me. It doesn't take too much to have a bunch of different text conversations kind of flowing in and out because I'm not super orderly in my life. Whereas my friend who like work blocks, right? Where he takes like 4 hours a day to do this thing, 4 hours a day to do that thing. And he answers all emails at the same time. That's stressful for him.
Yep.
Like you can't be having all those text messages flow in.
Yep.
And so we all have different things. Screen time is your friend. Like limit your screen time because you don't know how much it is until you actually get the report from Apple. It's like you spent 7 hours and 45 minutes on your phone today. And it's like, did I really? And it's like, yes, you did. And just creating the right habits for yourself. And I'm not here to condemn you. Like I'm using 7 hours and 45 minutes because that is probably my literal screen report. I have to look at it. It's probably my literal one. But like, make sure you take care of yourself and don't overlook the people around you. Because you got to receive love. You got to receive care. Who's your pastor? Who's your mentor? And one of the things that I wrote, right, Andy, do you have a text thread of people that you could confide in that will get you fired if it ever got released to the world? Like you need to have a circle of people that you can just let go.
Dude, that blog, you wrote that blog and I was a little bit in tears because it was like, right in there. Like you just got me all up in the feels. So I'll put a link to that in the show or in the description later. I'm going to put all your podcasts and stuff down there as well, plus your Twitter. So if anybody wants to come follow this amazing man of wisdom that has been on our screen for the last 30 minutes or so, they can. Jon, I am stoked to know you as a friend, but I'm also stoked to know you as a ministry colleague. I love what you're doing in the space, and I think while you might not be the next Stephen Furtick, I think you are doing things that not a lot of people are looking at, and that's the holistic approach to digital, to physical, and to the emotional side. So thanks for doing what you're doing, man.
Hey, thanks. I'll do some curls too, just in case.
Hey, let's go. Do some party pumps. Hey, everybody else in the Altar Live fam, thanks so much for joining us here. We'll be back next week. If at any point there's anything we can be helping you with, of course, you can always head to the doodly-doo, the website that's over there with all of our follow information, everything. One of us is always online, ready to help you, whether that's myself or Stephanie, our CEO, or Maeve when she's not on vacation. There it is right there. You know, Mr. Senior Pyle is pointing to it right now. We love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.